All right, we're back now with our story. How much land does a man need? The Tolstoy story. I'm with you on page 349, section number 7. Okay, so Pahom has been told. Here's the deal. Rules. You get as much land as you can walk in one day. We mark you at the place you start, and you start walking. We'll help, put markers out. But here's the deal. By the end of the day, you have to return back to where you started. That's the rules of the game. We'll hear it now from Pahom as the night before, laying on his feather bed, he imagines, I am going to be a multi-millionaire with all the land I'm going to have. Remember what he said? If only I could just get a small amount of extra land, the devil would never be able to tempt me again. The devil said, yeah, we'll see about that. Here we go.
Pahom lay on the feather bed, but could not sleep. He kept thinking about the land.
Right?
What a large tract I'll mark off, thought he. I can easily do 35 miles in a day. The days are long now, and within a circuit of 35 miles, what a lot of land there will be. I'll sell the poorer land or let it to peasants, but I'll pick out the best and farm it myself. I'll buy 2 ox teams and hire 2 more laborers. About 150 acres shall be plowland, and I'll pasture cattle on the rest. Pahom lay awake all night and dozed off only just before dawn. Hardly were his eyes closed when he had a dream.
The dream.
He thought he was lying in that same tent and heard somebody chuckling outside. He wondered who it could be and rose and went out, and he saw the Bashkir chief sitting in front of the tent holding his sides and rolling about with laughter. Going nearer to the chief, Pahom asked, "What are you laughing at?" But he saw that it was no longer the chief, but the grain dealer who had recently stopped at his house and had told him about the land. Just as Pahom was going to ask, "Have you been here long?" he saw that it was not the dealer, but the peasant, who had come up from the Volga long ago to Pahom's old home. Then he saw that it was not the peasant either, but the devil himself, with hoofs and horns, sitting there and chuckling. And before him lay a man, prostrate on the ground, barefooted, with only trousers and a shirt on.
350.
And Pahom dreamed that he looked more attentively to see what sort of man it was lying there, and he saw that the man was dead, and that it was himself. Horror-struck, he awoke. What things one dreams about, thought he. Looking around, he saw through the open door that the dawn was breaking. It's time to wake them up, thought he. We ought to be starting. He got up, roused his man, who was sleeping in his cart, bade him harness, and went to call the Bashkirs. It's time to go to the steppe to measure the land, he said. Pahom went straight toward the hillock, but he now walked with difficulty. He was exhausted from the heat. His bare feet were cut and bruised, and his legs began to fail. He longed to rest, but it was impossible if he meant to get back before...
All right, let's pause now. We're at the conclusion of section number 7, right? As he now the key for section number 7, of course, is the dream. So he's lying there, he can't go to, he's thinking about how amazing this is all going to be for him. This is going to be so unbelievably great. I'm going to have so many opportunities. Then he goes to sleep and he has a dream. In his dream, of course, strange dream, someone's sitting outside of a tent laughing at him. First he thinks it's the chief, then he thinks it's the peasant. Finally he sees it's the devil himself laughing at him. And then he sees himself dead. And he can't understand any of what's going on at all. It will be at this point he wakes up, and the only comment that he makes is, what a strange thing dreams are. Now, of course, let's put it at 3a. We're aware of this dream motif as it relates to that classic text we often reference in The Christmas Carol, the Scrooge story, where clearly Scrooge has his 3 visitations that are ultimately just 3 dreams. And of course it will be in that final one that Scrooge sees himself dead, and that really does affect him in powerful ways. Alright, let's go now to section 8, and then we'll finish with section 9. And because section 8 and section 9 are the heart of the story, let's just read them together, shall we? The Bashkirs got ready, and they all started. Some mounted on horses, some in carts. Pahom drove in his own small cart with his servant, took a spade with him. Remember, he's got to have the shovel, right? When they reached the steep, page 351, the red dawn was beginning to kindle. They ascended a hillock called by the Bashirs a Shechem, and dismounting from their carts and their horses gathered in one spot. The chief came up to Pahom and stretching out his arm toward the plain, "See," said he, "all this, so far as your eye can reach, is yours. You may have any part of it you like." Pahom's eyes glistened. It was all virgin soil, as flat as the palm of your hand, as black as the seed of a poppy, and in the hollows different kinds of grasses grew breast high. The chief took off his fox fur cap, placed it on the ground, and said, "This will be the mark. Start from here and return here again. All the land you go around shall be yours." Pahom took out his money, put it on the cap. Then he took off his outer coat, remaining in his sleeveless undercoat. He unfastened his girdle and tied it tight below his stomach, put a little bag of bread into the breast of his coat, and tying a flask of water to his girdle, his belt, he drew up the tops of his boots, took the spade from the man, and stood ready to start. He considered for some moments which way he had better go. It was tempting everywhere. The word tempting, of course, is key, right? "No matter," he concluded. "I'll go toward the rising sun." He turned his face to the east, stretched himself, and waited for the sun to appear above the rim. "I must lose no time," he thought, "and it's easier walking while it's still cool." The sun's rays had hardly flashed above the horizon when Pahom, carrying the spade over his shoulder, went down into the steep. Pahom started walking neither slowly nor quickly. After having gone 1,000 yards, he stopped, dug a hole, placed pieces of turf one on another to make it more visible, and he went on. And now that he had walked off his stiffness, he quickened his pace. After a while, he dug another hole. Pahom looked back. The hillock could be distinctly seen in the sunlight, with the people on it and the glittering iron rims of the cartwheels. At a rough guess, Pahom concluded that he had walked 3 miles. It was growing warmer. He took off his undercoat, slung it across his shoulder, went on again. It had grown quite warm now. He looked at the sun. It was time to think of breakfast. The first shift is done. By the way, notice, interesting, in the same way that we are reading this part of the story, you've been reading the story all the way through by sections, haven't you? Do you notice this? The genius of the story. In other words, section by section by section, we have been drawn to now the 8th section, knowing there's 9 sections left. And here he is for his one day to become a multimillionaire and to get all of this land. How amazing it's going to be. But he wants to pace himself, yes? The first shift is done. For there are 4 in a day, and it's too soon yet to turn. But I'll just take off my boots, said he to himself. He sat down, took off his boots, stuck them into his girdle, and went on. It was easy walking now. I'll go on for another 3 miles, thought he, and then turn to the left. Page 352. This spot is so fine that it would be a pity to lose it. The further one goes, the better the land seems. I just want to pause and have you write down that line. The further one goes, the better the land seems. And jot down at 2b, what is darkly ironic about this line? He keeps walking, wanting more land, never being content with what he has. He went straight on for a while, then he looked around. The hillock was scarcely visible, and the people on it looked like black ants, and he could see just something glistening there in the sun. Ah, thought Pahom, I've gone far enough in this direction. It's time to turn. Besides, I'm in a regular sweat and very thirsty. He stopped, dug a large hole, heaped up pieces of turf. Next, he untied his flask, had a drink, then turned sharply to the left. He went on and on. The grass was high. It was very hot. Pahom began to grow tired. He looked at the sun, saw that it was noon. Well, he thought, I must have a rest. He sat down, ate some bread, drank some water, but he did not lie down, thinking that if he did, he might fall asleep. I've had students who predict that's what happens, is that he lays down to take a little rest, and he goes to sleep, and when he wakes up, the sun is set. After sitting a little while, he went on again. At first he walked easily. The food had strengthened him. But it had become terribly hot, and he felt sleepy. Still he went on thinking, an hour to suffer, a lifetime to live. He went a long way in this direction also, and was about to turn to the left again when he perceived a damp hollow. It would be a pity to leave that out, he thought. Flax would do well there. So he went on past the hollow and dug a hole on the other side of it before he made a sharp turn. Pahom looked toward the hillock. The heat made the air hazy. It seemed to be quivering, and through the haze the people on the hillock could scarcely be seen. Ah, thought Pahom, I have made the sides too long. I must make this one shorter. And he went along the third side, stepping faster. By the way, notice, now finally, he's ready, isn't he, to begin to show a little bit of discipline. He looked at the sun. It was nearly halfway to the horizon. He had not yet done 2 miles of the third side of the square. He was still 10 miles from the goal. No, he thought, though it will make my land lopsided, I must hurry back in a straight line now. I might go too far. And as it is, I have a great deal of land. So Pahom hurriedly dug a hole and turned straight toward the hillock. Right? You can see this in your mind's eye, can't you? There he is walking, and then he keeps looking back, and he's getting further and further away from his starting point. And finally he goes, you know what? Bag it. I'm just going to turn and start heading back because I'm running out of daylight here. So we'll pause now at section 8. Write it down. This is often called the walking section, right? Where he's walking off his land. Of course, we know that section 9 is the end of our story, don't we? So we know this is the ending section, and to that degree, how's this story going to end? Before we finish, predict for yourself, how do you think this story is going to end? This famous story. That really does read more like almost like a fable, doesn't it? At the end, we'll see why. Pahom went straight toward the hillock. I'm on page 352, section 9. But he now walked with difficulty. You guess? He was exhausted from the heat, his bare feet were cut and bruised, and his legs began to fail. He longed to rest, but it was impossible if he meant to get back before sunset. The sun waits for no man, and it was sinking lower and lower. Oh, Lord, he thought, if only I had not blundered trying for too much. Top of page 353. What if I'm too late? He looked toward the hillock and at the sun. He was still far from his goal, and the sun was already near the rim of the sky. Pahom walked on and on. It was very hard walking, but he went quicker and quicker. He pressed on, but was still far from the place. He began running, threw away his coat, his boots, his flask, and his cap. He kept only the spade which he used as his support. What am I to do? He thought again. I've grasped too much and ruined the whole affair. I can't get there before the sun sets. So see the picture of him. Here he is now, thrown aside all of his stuff that might lay him, make him heavy, and now he's starting to run towards the finish line as the sun down, down, down. The sun is going. At this fear, right? What am I to do? What am I to do? And this fear made him still more breathless. Pahom kept on running. His soaking shirt and trousers struck to him, and his mouth was parched. His breast was working like a blacksmith's bellows. His heart was beating like a hammer, and his legs were giving way as if they did not belong to him. Pahom was seized with terror lest he should die of the strain. Though afraid of death, he could not stop. After having run all that way, they will call me a fool if I stop now, thought he. Note the irony of this idea. No, they're going to call you a fool because you're going to sacrifice your life. What's the title of the story? How much land does one man need? Yes? And he ran on and drew near and heard the Bashkirs yelling and shouting to him, and their cries inflamed his heart still more. He gathered his last strength and ran on. The sun was close to the rim of the sky and cloaked in mist, looked large and red as blood. Now, yes, now it was about to set. The sun was quite low, and he was also quite near his goal. Pahom could already see the people on the hillock waving their arms to make him hurry. He could see the fox fur cap on the ground and the money in it, and the chief sitting on the ground holding his sides. We're back to the dream, aren't we? And Pahom remembered his dream. There's plenty of land, thought he, but will God let me live on it? I have lost my life. I have lost my life. Never will I reach that spot. Pahom looked at the sun, which had reached the earth. One side of it had already disappeared. With all his remaining strength, he rushed on, bending his body forward so that his legs could hardly follow fast enough to keep him from falling. Just as he reached the hillock, it grew suddenly dark. He looked up. The sun had already set. Page 354. He gave a cry. All my labor has been in vain, thought he, and was about to stop. But he heard the Bashkir still shouting and remembered that, though to him from below the sun seemed to have set, they on the hillock could still see it. He took a long breath and ran up the hillock. It was still light there. He reached the top and saw the cap before it set the chief, laughing and holding his sides. Again, Pahom remembered his dream, and he uttered a cry. His legs gave way beneath him. He fell forward and reached the cap with his hands. You can see this in your mind's eye, yes? Ah, that's a fine fellow, exclaimed the chief. He has gained much land. Pahom's servant came running up and tried to raise him, but he saw that blood was flowing from his mouth. Pahom was dead. The Bashkirs clicked their tongues to show their pity. His servant picked up the spade and dug a grave long enough for Pahom to live in and buried him in it. 6 feet from his head to his toes was all he needed. How much land does a man need? The amount of land it takes to bury him, right? Absolutely right. The 6 feet. Whoa! Our story ends, section 9, then with the death of Pahom, the coming to the realization that he messed it up badly, didn't he? Let's jump to 2a. What does a story like this teach us about learning to be satisfied, learning to be content? The idea here often is expressed this way. Don't give all of your life to get the things that don't really matter. We've often said this, right, from our Scrooge study, that everybody at the end of their life says, oh my God, here it is, right, in this story. The question is the inflection of the voice. What is the inflection of the voice here? It is, of course, the inflection of, oh no, I gave all my life for what I cannot even imagine is of any value now because I'm dead. What does it profit, the famous line from the biblical text, to gain the whole world and lose your soul? Here it is, of course, coming in story form, coming to full fruition. Of course, another easy message is here, don't ask for what you don't need, right? Don't desire for what you don't need. Don't become upset when you don't get what you don't need, because it's silliness, the things that men and women aspire to, that somehow define them, and yet silliness. Well, of course, we said at the very beginning that we were going to pay very close attention to this idea. Go back to the very beginning of our story just for a second to remind ourselves that you wrote it down at 2b when we began this. I'm with you now back on page 335. And the literary analysis topic was theme. So now we'll ask you, what is the theme for you of this story? What is the point of a story like this? What is it that we're trying to address? And obviously at 2A we've already addressed some of this. What is for you the symbol? Some students say the most powerful symbol is the land itself. It represents the dream that really is never going to happen. You're never going to get enough. Langston Hughes called it the dream deferred. You never quite get enough of it, and therefore you're always longing for more. Let's talk really quickly at 3A. There are lots and lots of references. Hey, put this one in your notes. We've mentioned so many already. But put this in your notes at 3A. When you're juniors, we're going to study a great American author named Henry David Thoreau. And he's going to, Thoreau, and he's going to talk in his text, Walden, about the key of simplifying your life, of understanding what it is that you most need. Thoreau will spend a certain period of his life living in the woods all alone. He says, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life. What is it that you really need? Of course, we can jump to 3B now and ask that question. What are the most important essentials for you? What are the things that you have to have a happy life? And what are you willing to sacrifice to get those things? If you are not content with what you have, then how can you ever actually live a happy life? When was the time in your life you were most content? Another 3B question. When was the time in your life you were most happy? And to what degree can you live a life of ambition and desire, but still at the same time be happy and content? That's the key, it seems to us, as we study a text like this. What a brilliant offering by Tolstoy. I hope that this motivates you to want to read more texts by Tolstoy.